Yep, you're banned.
I love this movie. The overacting, the practical effects, Amanda from Saw, everything about this movie rocks. 1988's The Blob tells the tale of an insatiable blob from outer space that begins to consume a small town. Which got me thinking, what happens with the blob that ate everything versus, well, the blob that ate everything?
Bro is the Grim Eater.
The proverbial unstoppable force meets an immovable object, with the immovable object being a gaming streamer. Anyway, I'm back to poke fun at another internet personality. So in the case of Blob v Blob, I figured they would both try to eat each other and this would turn into some sort of hellish, sweaty amalgam of the two. So that's what I'm making. Plus, this guy made a career off reacting to people making fun of him, so I'm sure it's chill. So we're all happy with the logic behind this build? Great.
Hey, bro's built like a 1x1 Lego piece. What even is a 1x1 Lego piece?
So let's get building. I created a base out of a canvas board backing and bumped up the height with some foam core and topped this with a gesso board. Now for the blob itself, he's more of an amorphous moving glob of snot and cellulite. For the armature, I used a ball of alfoil and covered this in a layer of clay. Once this was dried and cooled down, I drilled in some insertion points for the tentacles. For the tentacles and tendrils, I wrapped some thick lengths of armature wire in some thinner lengths of armature wire, which gives the clay something to hold onto. While my base layer of clay was curing, I started to build up the setting. Now I wanted our blob boy to be rested on broken and cracked concrete, you know, because he's fat. So I lined the gesso board base with a 2mm foam sheet and cut out some sidewalks. As for the scene itself, I wanted to capture this sort of small town, Main Street America. I started by drawing the building facade on some graph paper before transferring this over onto a thin sheet of styrene. From there, it was just cutting out a billion little pieces of styrene to build up 2 general buildings, a cafe and a cinema. It's not too bad, right? Once construction was completed, I used some modelling paste to fill in any deficits in the styrene. Once dried, I used the modelling paste to create a concrete render effect on the outsides of the building. Back to the base now. Once the foam had dried, I gave it a sanding with some low grit sandpaper, which allows plaster to adhere to the foam easier. Once the plaster had dried, we did another sand to smooth it down before gluing on 2 strips of foam sheets to make up the sidewalks, before repeating the process again. I got this technique from Kathy Malat's YouTube page. I've linked her video underneath. I'm super happy with how it turned out. Shout out to Kathy. Now for the super satisfying part. Once all the plaster had dried, I was able to define the sidewalk pavers with a scraping tool, and because of the soft foam underlayer, I'm able to stick my fingers into the plaster to make all these little cracks. So back to our creature feature. I built up the underlayer of clay with some cosclay and started to define his tentacles and whatever the blob version of shoulders are. To give our blobbo the molten, blobby, my 600 pound life appearance, I mushed on 900 balls of clay to make it look as if he's kind of dripping. And finally, to round out the detailing and to make things a little bit more body horror-y, I took some creative inspo from the Goosebumps blob and made my boy all veiny. Because everyone knows when it comes to blobs, it's all about the goop and the veins. And of course, what's a blobbo without a face? Let's make this guy a little bit handsome. I started by making a Loomis head, pioneered by the famous Charles Xavier Loomis, probably. I like using this method because you've got the landmarks of the facial features. I've had far too many faces looking like Sloth from the Goonies. As for the face, I pushed in some pre-baked balls for the eyes and bulked up the nose, cheekbones and brows. From there, it's just a lot of poking and prodding, opening up some nose holes, chubbying up the cheeks, and doing some detailing around the eyes. With the main features of the face completed, it's now just defining and detailing the eyes and eyelids with a ball stylus, a poking and a blending tool. After a quick bake in the oven to lock in the baby blob's face, it's time to build up some of the hair. For the hair detailing, I try to work through progressively smaller and sharper tools, which allows for all that finer detail. So now we've got our blobboh looking like a 2013 Action Bronson. Let's attach him to the rest of our blob. Now fortunately for me, because I hate sculpting ears, CaseOh always tends to wear a hoodie, so I really appreciate that shortcut. I stuck down a flattened sheet of cosplay and stuck them in place with some little nubs for headphones. With the sculpting all completed, it's time to paint. I started with an undercoat of white paint, followed by a heavy coat of pink. His beard, eyebrows and hair got an orangey brown coat. Now let's get back to the base. The road got a black prime, followed by light grey pavement with a very heavy black wash. Because washes are normally diluted with either alcohol or a paint thinner, they tend to have a lower surface tension than water, which allows it to flow easier and leaving the pigments in the really small cracks and crevices. Once the washes had dried, the base got progressively lighter and lighter grey dry brushing, just to highlight the edges and really emphasise some of those cracks. As for the buildings, I tried to keep it a sandy, light, almost pastel colour palette. They all got the same treatment as the road, where they got a solid base colour, followed by a very dilute wash just to mute the colours, followed by a light beige dry brush. I wanted the buildings to capture that old 80s dusty town sort of feeling. Once all the paint had dried, it was just preparing the buildings for lighting. A heavy black coat of paint on the interior of the buildings will help increase the opacity of the styrene before lining any of the windows with some diffusing film. And after some of the most offensive wiring and soldering imaginable, the base was complete.
Oh dude, that looks sick. Nice.
With the buildings and the base finished, it's now just the final touches on the blob. A heavy black wash to the blob body, as well as the beard and the hair. I used a pale pink base colour for the skin, and some intricate detailing just where the beard and the eyebrows meet the skin. The eyes just got a very dilute acrylic red wash in the corners, and the face got one final dry brushing to bring out some of the lightness of the beard, as well as some of the pinks in the cheeks, in the nose, as well as the lips. And the body got one final light pink dry brush just to bring out the highlights in the veins and the blobs. Now I can imagine a guy like CaseOh probably couldn't move very far, let alone chase down a whole town without breaking into some sort of monumental sweat. So the piece was finished with a gloss varnish, followed by some UV resin just to make things look a little bit more wet and sticky. Now this build took way longer than what I'd planned for. So if you've made it this far, thanks for sticking around. If you're liking what I'm doing, please like and subscribe, chuck on a comment, it really helps with visibility on YouTube, and let me know about any kind of creature, internet personality mashups that could be fun. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one.